cloud, agile, Kubernetes, microservices, ChatGPT, blockchain. I'm sure you're passionate about one, two, maybe more of these technologies, because when you're a tech-savvy person like me, or when you're working in IT, then it's really natural to be really excited about powerful and recent technologies. Now today I want to talk about one issue that I frequently see about this excitement and share my experience with you. And we start with an old saying which is reflecting this pretty well. It is, to a person with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That is a trap that I see commonly in daily IT work. And it's basically when you have certain technologies that you really like or that you're really good at using, and you're just using these for every problem that comes your way. And whatever it is, maybe you're passionate about distributed systems, maybe you're a blockchain enthusiast, maybe you're really going with the AI hype and ChatGPT. Maybe you're a front-end developer and you really like this new front-end framework that makes everything easier for you. Or you're really some hardcore Scrum enthusiast, or you're into test-driven development or whatever. Doesn't matter what it is. When you're working as a professional or you want to get into professional IT, it's important to not fall into this trap of blindly using your favorite technology just for the sake of using it. Now, when you're playing around for yourself, when you have a little hobby project, when you do it for fun, personally, there's nothing wrong with that. I do that too. But in a professional context, when you're applying your skills and knowledge in exchange for money, then it is a big risk to fall into this trap. Imagine you made yourself a delicious pizza and now you want to cut your pizza. And instead of using a knife or a pizza cutter, which would be an excellent tool for the job, you could have the idea of, let's use a spoon, because I know how to use a spoon pretty well, and maybe you only have a spoon there and you try to cut your pizza with a spoon. Now that's probably kind of difficult, but it might work depending on the spoon and how crusty your pizza is. You might succeed with that, although it's pretty inefficient, and that is what typically happens. It becomes very inefficient to solve a problem with a tool that is not really suitable for the job. Now, in a worst case scenario, you're not solving the problem at all and you will completely fail with your attempt and just waste resources. So let's say you're not using a spoon, but you're using a hammer to cut your pizza. It's probably not going to work, and chances are high you're going to stay hungry and just waste a lot of time and effort in trying to cut this pizza with your hammer. And that's what happens when the technology is really unsuitable or you have no idea how to apply it to a given problem. Of course, we want to avoid that. And this example, it might sound a bit silly and like common sense, but it's actually very common in IT. It happens every day, multiple times. So we need to be aware of it. And I want to give you a few example hints from my experience that might indicate that you have fallen into this trap or someone else. And sometimes I myself catch myself and see, hey, is this really the right tool for the job? Or am I just using it because I really like this technology or I want to learn about it? So here are a few examples that might indicate you have fallen into this trap. One classic example is when software developers first learn about design patterns. You know, those object-oriented design patterns. It's a real classic and it's still useful. But the thing is, when I learned about them and when many others learned about them, first they are looking at every possible problem and trying to solve it with a design pattern because it feels good to apply this knowledge. It's natural. But usually that's way over the top. And there's only a few specific problems that you can really reasonably solve with design patterns. It's not for every context. Another one is when you're adding a big framework or many dependencies on a new project setup just by default because you know this framework or you really like it or you think everyone should use it. Doesn't matter which one it is, doesn't matter if it's a Spring framework, if it's Angular, doesn't really matter. But if you do that by default without looking at the needs of the project, without looking at the team, how the competencies are distributed in your team and what is suitable for the job. If you're just adding it by default because you have always used it, in quotes, that's probably a sign you're one of those hammer and nail people. Number 3 is when you opt for a very complex, scalable architecture, like using microservices and Kubernetes, although a simpler approach would be totally fine. So let's say you're building a single user application, which is just for a single user, doesn't need to be highly available, doesn't even need to be reachable from the internet. Maybe it's just a local application for a single user. Then there's no real point in applying this architectural style. But some people are so into it that they can't or won't use anything else. Then there is another point, which is limiting yourself to one programming language or tool or concept just because you haven't really applied another one or learned about something else. So if I know Java and all I know is Java, then I'm trying to solve every issue with Java. Now let's say I want to build a command line application for a company or maybe for myself. It's probably not the best idea to do it in Java. You can do it, but there's many other tools where it's easier to build a command line application with. So that's another example. And then the last one is when you force your team into a process just because it's, in quotes, the standard way to do it, to develop software or whatever. Now, it doesn't matter if it's Scrum or some other process. If you think it's the only and the golden way to do it, it's probably one of these hammer and nail scenarios. You should look at the business needs and at the team that you have and what works best for them, how the structure is in the company and so on. So, bottom line of all this talk is, as a professional for us, it's important that for any given problem, we pick a suitable tool. Don't make the mistake of inventing problems for your favorite technology. If you want to do that, do it for fun, privately, but please don't do it in a professional environment. Now, how about you? Have you ever tried to cut your pizza with a hammer? I certainly made this mistake in my earlier IT days, so feel free to share your experience and feel free to follow me if you want to enjoy more content about software engineering.